Sean over All Select Music. Today I want to talk about this album right here. This is Squarepusher's Be Up a Hello, released on Warp Records on January 31st, 2020. This album right here was entirely responsible for me doing this whole Squarepusher review series. If it wasn't for this, I probably wouldn't have tried to take on this project in the first place. And despite the fact that I've basically been listening to nothing but Squarepusher for the last 3 or 4 months, I'm kind of surprised I didn't get as sick of his music as I thought I would. In fact, I think I'm probably still going to be listening to a lot of Squarepusher in the future, and I'm quite surprised that it was basically the release of this album right here that reinvigorated my interest in Squarepusher in the first place, because for the longest time I hadn't really been that interested in listening to his music, and with the release of this guy, it totally brought me back to all of my favorite Squarepusher releases. So I guess in that regard, I kind of have to thank it for that. But I am so happy to finally be done with this project. I am so happy that I can finally move on, move back into talking about other material. So with all that being said, yeah, I'm not going to waste any more time on an introduction, and let's just get into this guy. Looking on Fact Magazine's website for the album announcement for Be Up a Hello, Squarepusher said he was abandoning the software that he had been developing for 15 years that assisted with the making of his 2 previous albums, Demigen Furies and Ufabulum, and he wanted to go back to his old 90s gear that included a collection of analog synths, vintage effect units, and a Commodore VIC-20. The reason being, according to an interview Tom did with Resident Advisor, well, I'll let the man himself tell that story.
Okay, but according to the bio that I've read, the origins of this kind of traces back to an accident in Norway. You slipped on some ice and broke your arm.
That's correct,
but
yeah.
I'm wondering, what were you doing working in Norway on some slippery ice?
Well, yeah, I was actually walking rather than working at that point when I slipped, but I was out there with my partner, who was doing an artist in residency program out in Norway on an island called Trana, out in the Norwegian Sea, which is a pretty fascinating place, and I was just tagging along. But I'd taken a couple of bits and bobs to do some work and things, as well as just kind of mooch about. And just out for a walk one day with the wrong footwear, basically. Went flying on some ice, landed on my left wrist and smashed it. It was pretty devastating because I got it looked at and happened to crack a bone that has a nerve running through it, and that can lead to like loss of feeling in your fingers, possibly need surgery, this kind of stuff. And as a guitar player, that's pretty frightening. You know, it looked like there was some sort of conceivable chance that I was actually going to be kind of hampered or perhaps even unable to play. So it did cause me to have a stop and a think and a moment of reflection, given that I was also, I guess, in a state of distress, really, because of the concern that this injury provoked. I was looking for sort of a way to ameliorate the kind of sense of difficulty, so I thought I'm just going to go for something nice and comfortable in terms of recording. Just going to go back to all my old stuff, my old analog kit, and just have some fun with it, you know, and just start again. Try to treat it like a new start. I have this craving anyway for turning over a new leaf, like a kind of year zero. Of course, at 44, you know, I've been making records more than half my life, so that's in the end not really actually even vaguely conceivable, but still with a bit of an effort of will and some imagination, you can get some way there. So that's what I wanted to do. So I just set it all up, all the old analog stuff, and just set up this rule. I would just make a track a day. So 1 track every, you know, 24-hour period. So at the end of the day, I would just record whatever I'd done, and the next day I'd move on. So it was this very, very kind of fast-moving and light-hearted, flippant approach to composing and recording.
And this is a process that you've done before, or is this like a new process?
Yeah, I mean, it will often sort of come along in lulls, you know, after big tours or, you know, some other kind of much more intense phase of recording, you know, something that was perhaps, you know, very technically or psychologically demanding, you know. It's this kind of moment I crave, you know, like a little holiday, if you like, a little break. But it's still doing, you know, the thing that I love, but in a much less programmatic and focused and frankly, you know, in a way that doesn't really, at the time of doing it at least, it feels like it has no real relation to my kind of career in the sense of being a public figure and putting work into the public domain. So frankly, it was just a time to mess about. And it was great. You know, I mean, I was still faced with this dire stress of like, well, am I ever going to be able to play again? But, you know, it was a good way of distracting myself for the time being.
Keeping the fear at bay.
Yeah. Well, we all find different ways to do that, right?
Do yourself a favor and go back and listen to the whole 50-minute interview, as it not only gives you more background into the making of this album, but it gives you his whole origin story, his whole process in making music, and on top of that, this is probably one of the friendliest interviews I've heard from him to date. And it seemed like this sort of retro approach to making music did him some favors, with the album earning an average score of 76 on Metacritic, and some going as far as to call it his best album in years. But where do I stand in all of this? It's fine. No, seriously, it's okay. It's not the worst Squarepusher album, and it's far from my favorite Squarepusher album. Truth be told, I really don't have that much to say about it, because basically this sounds like a cross-section of all things Squarepusher, past, present, and possibly future. But mostly just past. There aren't really any new ideas on here, and the tracks on here are just largely fine. They're not bad necessarily, but they're not necessarily great either. The opener is pretty cool. Oberlove is probably one of the most complex tracks that he's put out to date, while still keeping in line with that whole retro kitsch that he said he was going for this project. The second track on here, Hitsonu, same sort of vibe, still pretty cool, just not one of the more memorable Squarepusher tracks. And Nerve Levers is probably one of the better, just straight up IDM drill and bass bangers on here, as well as the track Terminal Slam. I do like the melodic essence and somber ambience of the track Detroit People Mover, and yeah, that's pretty much it. The fact of the matter is, when it comes to stuff like this, is basically an album like this has to compete with everything else that exists in his catalog. In a vacuum, this project is fantastic. Compared to everything else that he's done with all the different albums that he has in his vast discography, I just don't see how this album stands out that much. I kind of like the cover art for it. That's pretty cool. But aside from that, I mean, nothing on here screams, I need to listen to this over, say, the Big Loda compilation, or Ultra Visitor, or Fabulum, or Demigan Furies, or basically anything except for D-Demonstrator. That album goes straight into the trash. So yeah, it's not bad. It's well put together. Sounds all right. It's got some cute melodies to it. It's got the signature Squarepusher sound. It just doesn't sound any better than anything he's released in the past. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a Squarepusher completionist record. After you've bought everything else and you still feel the desire and need to listen to more Squarepusher, I don't know, give it a listen. But other than that, I really don't feel like this is essential Squarepusher by any stretch of the imagination. So I bet you can guess where this is going. If you haven't figured it out, where this album's going on the Squarepusher tier list, yeah, this one's going in the C territory. I don't know what else to say about it. I was kind of hoping to like this album quite a bit more, as it was the one that reinvigorated my interest in Squarepusher's music, and that was largely from Terminal Slam. I loved the video for that, and I really liked the fact that he was going back to that glitchy drill and bass sound. But then it turned out that a lot of his other albums were doing that too, and it was just completely on me that I didn't notice that a lot of his music had already been doing this sound, so there wasn't really anything that new or interesting going on here. So, like I said, it's not a bad album, but it's definitely not a highlight for me. And with that, I can finally put the Squarepusher review series to rest. And with all that being said, guys, so that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks as always for watching. If you've listened to this album for yourself, please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. If you want to hear this album for yourself or listen to the interview that I talked about in this video, please head over to my WordPress blog, because that's where I post links to anything that I talk about on this channel. And as always, make sure you're here every Sunday for Live from the Record Room, my weekly DJ live stream. There you can hear me play records like the ones that I talk about in this video, as well as a whole host of other records that I don't get a chance to talk about on this channel. And just in the event that a stream gets blocked by YouTube due to copyright, I will be posting the audio over to my long dormant Mixcloud, so there you can check it out just in case you didn't get a chance to watch it live. And if you want to know anytime when I'm going live, make sure you follow me on Twitter, as that's probably the easiest way to find out when I plan to go live on this YouTube channel. Links to everything, as always, down in the description. So that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thanks, as always, for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. So until then, peace out!